Today we will be looking at organizing, displaying, and describing univariate data. Before we can talk about different types of graphs, we have to talk about the requirements for quality graphs. In order to remember these requirements, we use the acronym TAILS. T stands for title. Every good graph must have a clearly defined title so the reader knows what information is being presented. A stands for axis. This means that you must have a vertical or y-axis and a horizontal or x-axis clearly labeled so that your reader can see the graph neat and organized. The I stands for intervals. How many are you counting by? It's necessary to make sure you count by an appropriate amount. For example, if you had to count up to 1,000 on the x-axis, counting by ones would be too small of a number, but counting by 100s would be more appropriate. The L stands for labels, meaning that both your x or horizontal axis and your y or vertical axis are clearly labeled so the reader knows what they are representing, whether it's time, distance, money, a value, etc. And last, the S stands for scale, meaning that you have equal distance separating each interval along your x-axis and along your y-axis. We also must remember to always use as much space as possible and make our graph as clean and neat as possible for the reader. The first type of graph that we're going to look at in this unit is a bar graph. In the bar graph in front of you, it's easy to see that it has a clearly defined title and there's a clearly defined label along the x-axis. Here we are talking about student grades, and the different categories are A's, B's, C's, or D's. There is no label along the y-axis, which would be nice to have. However, we can infer in this case that we're referencing the number of students receiving a particular grade. The other nice thing about this bar graph is that it has clearly defined labels at the top of each bar, so the reader can easily see how many students got a particular grade. For example, 4 students received an A and 10 students received a C are easy to read thanks to the label at the top of the bar. The second type of graph that we'll look at is a histogram. The main difference between a histogram and a bar graph is that along the bottom, the histogram is based on ranges of data instead of distinct points. For example, this histogram is representing ranges of data for cost of theme park admission. $7 to $14 is one range, $15 to $22 is another, $23 to $30, $31 to $38, and $39 to $46 are the remaining ranges on this graph. This graph is neatly labeled both in a title and along both the x or horizontal axis and y or vertical axis. The one thing this graph is missing is clearly defined labels at the top of each bar to make it easier to read for an observer. Up next we have a pie chart. A pie chart is also referred to as a circle graph. In a pie chart, all of the percentages must add up to 100%. Secondly, in a pie chart, each category must be labeled and have a percentage attached. It's easy to see here that in browser usage on Wikimedia during October 2011, the highest browser being used was Internet Explorer at 34.2%, while the lowest browser being used was the Android browser, or with 1.9%. These are easy to read thanks to a clearly defined title and percentage for each section of our pie chart. Up next we have a box plot, or a 5-number summary. The 5-number summary consists of 5 key numbers to describe the data. The first 2 key numbers are the minimum and maximum value. These are the leftmost point for the minimum value and the rightmost point for the maximum value. It's clear to see that the height of girls, the minimum value is 61, and for the height of boys, the maximum value is 74. These are clear to see due to the number line that accompanies every box plot at the bottom. It makes the graph easy to read for an observer. The second point we look for in a box plot is the median, or middle value. It's halfway between the minimum and the maximum in a box plot, and is denoted by the dashed line and blue arrows. The next value we look for is quartile 1, or Q1. Sometimes this is referred to as the lower quartile. In our case, it's represented by the red bar and red arrows. This can be found by listing from the minimum value to the middle value and finding the median between just those numbers. The next number is quartile 3, or Q3. This is sometimes referred to as the upper quartile, and in our graph is denoted by the green arrows and green bars. To find this value, you write out from the middle value to the maximum value and calculate the median between those. The last kind of graph we will look at is a dot plot. In a dot plot, like a box plot, you also have a number line across the bottom to serve as your axis. Then you put a dot each time a given value occurs. The way you read this is, for example, in this case we're talking about number of family members, and 3 people, denoted by 3 dots, had 5 members in their family, whereas 1 person had 9 members in their family, denoted by a single dot. Dot plots are relatively easy and quick to create. For class on Monday, you need to bring in the answer to the following 6 questions written down in your notebook. We will use these throughout the week as data to create the different types of graphs that we will be practicing, and will be on your quiz next Friday. The first question is, what kind of pets do you have in your house? Fish, dogs, cats are examples of those categories. Secondly, we have the question, how many siblings do you have? You answered this in class the other day and should be pretty easy to get. Third, the question is, what ages of people live in your house? For example, if your mom was 40 and you were 14 and your brother was 9, you would list 40, 13, and 9 as your answer to that question. The fourth question, how tall are you in inches? Remembering that 1 foot is 12 inches, if you were 4 feet tall, you would say 4 times 12, or you would list 48 inches. The fifth question is, what is your shoe size? The sixth question is, how do you get to school? For example, do you ride the bus? Do you walk? Do you ride your bike? Do you longboard? How do you get to school each day? You need to make sure you write down the answer to each of these 6 questions before coming to class on Monday, so we can collect that data and have those answers to be used throughout the course of the week. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you Monday.